at this point, I feel I need to steer back to something that we had said in the last episode. We had discussed, it was actually just a discovery. Turns out the three of us were raised by single mothers. Yeah. So, how was your experience?
Wow.
Hi guys, back like we never left, because we didn't. The conversation had bled beyond the minutes that we had, and we were discussing the fact that we're discussing single motherhood, our experiences with single motherhood, right? And specifically, the question that was on the table had been
how do you emphasize?
Yeah. So, actually, you had given us your views. Bwana Zolani, you had given us your views.
Yeah.
Solo tuambie. How do you empathize with a single mother? But also, as we discuss that, we also need you guys to let us know. With regards to being around single parents who have an issue with co-parenting. How do you help resolve that drama? Yeah.
Being around.
Or how would you advise a man, especially because we are men? How do you advise a man to go about single parenthood, co-parenting in a dope way with the mother of his kids?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded. That's a very loaded one, right? Especially coming from me. I mean, they always say like, never take the contextualized advice. Like, so, if everything you hear is like, I mean, I think there are people who are always willing to give you like feedback and advice when it comes to such kind of things, right? Like co-parenting, like what's good for you and what's not. But I think having that perspective of not taking advice that's decontextualized, I think it's important. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to mindset. Like, and I think these are an interesting one. I think something that I always do personally. I don't know whether you guys do a lot. I do a lot of like scenario forecasting in my mind. I play lots of scenarios in my mind, right? So when it comes to like things like now co-parenting, you really have to think about the scenarios not just on your perspective, but also on your child's perspective, right? So given that, the best way to do it, you can actually listen to people who've actually been in that situation, trying to learn from the lessons that they have. But if that's the minimum, like sort of like evil, like co-parent is not the number one, but it's where you find yourself in, then it's doable, right? But I think the mindset has to change and reflect a lot like your current situation, right? Because I think even when it comes to co-parenting, I think you're the one who probably tell us the best the downsides of it, right?
I'll tell you two pieces of advice that I was given.
Yeah.
The first was by an older guy who had been through the journey of co-parenting. And I remember this guy telling me, listen, Dugu, for as long as you're single, prepare yourself that once in a while you'll have to lay pipe. And the reason you're telling me I'll have to lay pipe once in a while, and when you're single, is because this guy was like, listen, sometimes the frustrations that you're dealing with are from someone who is frustrated from that perspective. And I'm not saying I've done it, right?
Make that disclaimer.
I'm not saying I've done it.
Disclaimer
but
that
in situations such as this guy, his situation, while you're single, I could see it help his situation. But the problem is the dismount is always going to be tricky because you prolong the bonds that are there, such that when you finally move on or she moves on and is in a new relationship, that's a new complication, right? So I can't really stand by that advice. The one that I can't stand by I got from my mother. My mother was a very pragmatic woman. And my mother told me, listen, Chim, give it your all. Be there for the kids. If it's complicated, leave. You have the apparatus to make more. Walk away. And my mother gave me this advice because my mom was like, listen, it is worse for you to be there and for the children to see their mother constantly belittle you, constantly berate you, or for the children to see you and their mother constantly fighting. And the truth of the matter is, in my personal situation, as I said, I was not the best of, I'm on record saying this, I was not the best of co-parents to begin with. I had to mature, right? And even as we were on that journey, and as the mother of my kids was also maturing, we used to have a lot of conflict. And it got to a point where my mom told me, you will end up doing far more damage to this child by you being present and fighting all the time. You might as well just let the mother of the children know and her people know, once you guys are ready to embrace me, I am here to be there for the children. And once I got to that point, once I drew that line in the sand, things became a lot easier because now the mother of my children realized, okay, in as much as he has his iniquities, he has been trying and he's present. Let me extend to him some grace and see how things go. So for me, mine would be just be prepared to walk away. Don't beat yourself. Don't, get to the point where it becomes self-flagellation simply because you're like, I must be here, I must be here. You can't keep holding on to a hot rod. Sometimes you have to let go. And that's just the truth. That's the pragmatic truth.
And the question I would have, especially looking from outwards, right? When it comes to co-parenting, like there's a separation in your relationship, but there's a union in your parenthood, right?
Yes.
So when
I like that.
Yeah. So when it comes to the conflict that tends to happen in a co-parenting situation, like where does it delve into? Is it into your parenthood, like your role as a father, or does it emanate from the private relationship that your co-parent has?
We are human beings, so it's both. Both bleed into each other. So there are times when the mother of my children, we've had a conversation with her where she was dating someone whom I felt was, he was a F-boy. And I had to sit her down and tell her, listen, you're making the same mistakes with this guy that you made with me, and I have to step in because at some point it is going to affect my kids, right? And I'm on record having said, it gets to a point where I am more than willing to sit down with this guy. If she cannot get her father or brother to sit down with the guy, I am more than willing to sit down with this guy and tell him, listen, bro, I can see the games you're playing. And while I don't have a problem with you playing those games, the problem is the person with whom you're playing them. You're running game on a woman who is the mother of my children. That affects my children. That means now you and I have a situation, right? Which I guess feeds back to what Xola was saying, the complication of dating a single mother if the man is involved. Away from that, there is also my personal bias, right? I was raised a certain way. My being raised a certain way means I see discipline from a certain perspective, right? She sees discipline from a different perspective, right? Us guys got to learn from a very early age that we have to be a team. We have to be a team. That is one thing that I'm truly grateful for, that we caught on very early on in this regard. The biggest headache is usually discipline. I come from a household where we were beaten, we were spanked. She comes from a household where they were treated almost like young adults in the sense that your parent would give you a stand talking to, right? How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that? The children are with me, they're misbehaving. I'm not saying, I'll go upside their head. I usually just, flick the fingers. Given their hands, it's usually a bit painful. So it elicits an immediate change in behavior, right? Then I talk to them and explain to them why, right? She was upset that I'd do that. So then we had to actually take a step back, sit down and say, okay, you know what? I have to trust you to discipline the children in love. I have to trust that you're not trying to hurt them. I have to trust that you're disciplining them in love. And I think that actually has brought about the main thing. Trust. You have to trust I have the best interest for our children at heart. I have to trust the same for you. However, I always say this. In the matter of shoes, always defer to the wisdom of the cobbler. And what I mean by that is, she's with these children 80% of the time. I'm a weekend father, right?
Yeah.
80% of the time you're with the kids, right? You know these kids inside and out while I'm still learning them. We talk a lot on phone, but I'm still learning them. So there are certain things she will tell me to do, and I have to implicitly trust immediately that she knows what she's saying. Yeah? So that's how that goes.
You guys have given some very good answers, but I want to venture a question first of all. Is there a possibility that these people can get back together? What am I saying? Many co-parents, they separate and none of them get kids afterwards. My thing is this. I'm a Christian. I said this already. I believe prayer works. My first advice would be this. I'm not a parent, yes, but I believe prayer is very important. Pray about that person. Pray about your relationship. Pray about your co-parent. In terms of not even getting back together, just so that you can get along for the kids. If there's no possibility of you ever getting back together. My thing will be, if there are no big hindrances to you guys getting back together. I don't know, if we're going to give out solutions, I believe our solution should also be getting back together as a family. If you have not significantly moved on, it will not affect big parts of your life for both of you. Get back together and give your children or your child the best upbringing that they can possibly get.
The gift of two parents.
Yes. Work on those things, the issues that you have. And I'm not talking about things like obviously physical abuse and all that. That's extra. I'm talking about things that may be differences in worldview and all that. There's some things you can have to disagree on, but you say, guys, we are here for these kids, or these kids. Let us, these differences we have, they are too minuscule to, they are small in comparison to the vision we have for our child. That's the thing I would recommend. That's the first one. Second one is prayer. People are not praying anymore, and God is real. I've seen my life changing because of prayer. Pray about your partner or the person you're co-parenting with. You might have an issue of this or this or that. Pray for them about that issue. God can change some people on some issues. That is that's my take on that.
And what would you say is like the role of counseling? Because prayer is one thing, right? And there's also now that aspect of
Counseling is very important.
taking necessary steps to find a common ground.
And especially if the resources are there. Because we also need to understand we have third world realities.
Yeah.
Kenya is a shithole. So those resources are not always going to be available. But where the counseling comes in is, it doesn't necessarily have to be you going to a professional to sit down and you pay them for them to listen to you and as you figure out what's happening. It could be as simple as you go to your mother, you go to your father, right? I know the mother my children went for actual therapy. I'll be the first to admit I did a lot of damage there. She went for actual therapy, right? I didn't. I had to sit down and be very vulnerable with some people who actually held me accountable, like the bald man over there in the corner. Yeah, that bald man did not cut me any slack. We had some very horrible fights. Horrible. Actually, I dare say it would get. I should have said this from the beginning. That is the godfather of my children. So when I say they were horrible, he felt he had a stake in it. And when you don't know that times it nearly got violent. Because there were things I would do, as I said. I am the type of man who finds it very easy to cut ties and move on. You cannot do that with the mother of your children and still hope to have a healthy relationship with your children. I'm not saying that you guys will have to be buddy-buddy. But for the love of God, learn how to de-alienate. We are men. Learn how to compartmentalize and say, I don't necessarily like this woman. This woman is taka-taka. But for the sake of my children, I have to stomach some things from her. The same thing I'd advise a woman. You don't necessarily have to like the man whose children you chose to bear.
You said to carry that thing for 9 months.
For 9
9 months.
And then going into labor.
For a bastard, man.
For you to come out and then say, Yabuki angalie. No.
All men are trash. That
As long as he is willing to put in the effort, there are certain things you're going to have to stomach. The mother of my children had to stomach my womanizing ways. And that was a huge source of conflict for us, because it was a huge source of conflict for us. But as I grew out of it, she also at the same time had to realize, this is for now who he is. Can I separate this from his parenthood? Right? And it was a conscious effort on her part to separate my unsavory tabias from who I am as a father. And it was when the kids became old and I began to realize, okay, I as a father cannot separate this side of me from who I am as a father to my children, as they became more and more cognizant. Because let's not lie, kids are not born at being able to read the room, but they evolve that ability. When the kids were 1, 2, 3, first of all, when your children are born, they look like naked rats. Let's be honest, guys. There's nothing for it. Cute baby, they look like naked rats. They cannot perceive the world, right? But as they grow and blossom into beautiful, tiny human beings that get your ears, that get your nose, you're getting.
Yeah.
When, as they begin to evolve into that, you begin to also say, okay, as a man, there are some things I need to change. Yeah? And she had to be patient as I worked it out of my system. I had to be patient as she worked some stuff out of her system. Yeah. Also, at this point, I feel I need to steer back to something that we had said in the last episode. We had discussed, it was actually just a discovery. Turns out the three of us were raised by single mothers. Yeah. So, how was your experience?
Wow. I mean, it's one of those things where, at first, like preschool, right? Everything is normal because, like you said, like kids don't have a sense of the world. So for me, it was the same thing, right? I don't have a sense of what's normal. Like what society sort of expects, like kind of arrangement you're supposed to have at home. So preschool, it was nice, right? And I remember for me personally, I was brought up also in through also my grandparents who also played an active role,
really good.
Right?
That is really good.
And at the time, I was actually for my early years of school, I was in Shags, just in the village, right? And when it came to like things like, parents going to school, prize giving day or whatever, then my grandpa would step up, right, and show up and play that role of an active father, right? And in that case, like, it wasn't out there that I must, from a single, mother. Right? So life there was really good. But now what tended to happen was like I moved out of like Shags, came to the city, the Silicon Savannah. And when you come to the city, then you meet different kinds of peers, right? People who have a different upbringing, people who are asking you direct questions, right? Like, where is your father? Right. That's something that I never had in the rural upbringing, but in the city it was there, right? And for me, it was always a very difficult question, right, to answer, right? And I remember because when I was young, I wasn't privy to a lot of information, like on the whereabouts, right? It's one of those things you're given limited information and you're told to hang on to that, right? So for me, it was one of those very sensitive topics as a primary school going kid who has their mother's surname, right? One of those things where it's school where they're reading marks, right? And you have your name, you're supposed to write your surname and your other names. And then each time a teacher would call out my name, and they would, some teachers would even sing, specifically call the surname.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And when kids hear that, right, there's always
And
that.
once if you have a female surname, it's like
it's always like,
yeah.
what's with all that? Right? And even I at that stage like didn't really understand why my name was the way it was, right? So what was the whole effect of that limited information, not knowing how to sort of like behave when you have these questions, is that sometimes I would tell my close friends, but for like your second, third degree connections, you don't want to say the truth, right? You want to come up with a story, fabricate, right? And even like second, third degree connection didn't really know that I didn't have a father. I always say there was a man in the house, there's a father in the house. So for me, that limited information really made me not say the truth. It led me to a lie in some instances for the sake of convenience, right? So I think for me, like I think so for some other people, they grow up knowing the full picture.
Yes.
Which is a different one. Like, but for me, in my case, it was, I think my strategy my mother had was just to give enough information just to, what I can stomach at that age.
Age
right?
appropriate.
Age appropriate content, right? So for me, that was really tough because it affected the relationships I had with people in the sense that they couldn't fully understand me and my, where I come from and that was stuff, right? I think when you mature, that's when you start seeing people who have similar circumstances as you. Like you start seeing people who have one boy as their surname and all of that, and then you're like, wow,
I'm not the only one.
I'm not the only one. Samuel Wanjiro. You start seeing these people out there. So I think there are people who are actually in that same situation as I am today, lacking exposure to tell them that actually you're not alone. There are people who are out there in the same circumstances as you, and it's actually okay, right, to say who you are and where you come from.
Yes.
But that realization is something that takes time, right? Because you need to actually be confident in saying that, you come from this. And for me, we are just two, right? Single mother, I don't have brothers or sisters, right? So that's a very unique family, right? So I think with that realization that even after primary school, in high school, that's when I fully embraced my, identity, right? And to easily say that my son is actually Wangoi, right? Right? And putting it out there, right? So I think that's just in a nutshell, like how being raised by a single mother, like, shaped me.
How about you, Xola?
He has done a very good job of...
Actually, he has. You have. I could relate to a lot of what you're saying, yeah.
In fact, I'll do what you've done because it's easier to go from my childhood to up.
Yeah.
Childhood, I was very lucky. I grew up with my grandparents because my grandparents had 13 kids. So he was a civil servant, so he was doing very well. We used to live in Kilimani. And growing up, I did not know anything. A boy 7, 6, 7, 8, you don't know anything.
You don't know anything about anything, yeah.
Because I grew up with all those siblings and my aunts, my uncles in the same house. When you find out you're different is when you go to school.
Yeah.
Nursery and primary, you don't know anything. It's when you go to class 2, 3 there, when you now start getting...
Even when the homework becomes, when they're trying to teach you about, this is my mother, then you write the names, this is my father, then you write the names. I remember for me, it was like...
And the funny thing is, the biggest regret or the biggest tragedy for me in primary was being sent home from school because there was no fees. And that was a common thing for guys who were from a single parent family. So it was something I used to see, because I used to know what I was like, hey, these guys were going home, these guys are going home. Most times to a single mother. And I'm not casting aspersions or anything like that. The truth is, when you have two parents, it's easier to...
There's more resources.
There's more resources. So I was always in the list for fees. So that is something that used to always bother me. Because anytime this come, you're offering with your fees, go home, go home, as in...
It's the same, yeah.
Same. So you, from that time, you start learning already the advantages of having two parents in your home. And you look at it, you're like, you don't even think about your father until that thing becomes, you don't have money, or the resources are very limited. And my grandfather tried to do what he could. He never used to come to school, but at home, he was a really good authority figure. He actually gave me my work ethic. And I thank God for that. My mom did the best she could. My mom was a wonderful mom. But there are things women are just not equipped to do.
You know, I always tell guys, a lioness cannot raise a lion. Ultimately, regardless of what you think, you will not be able to turn that boy into the man he needs to be. He will only be half a man, and heavily on the feminine side, because that is what he...
In fact, you've given me something I was going to say. Because of that lack of a father in my life, I think I've seen my father less than 10 times in my life, maybe 10 to 20 times in my whole life. And I'm over 30. And the only time he came to school was to pay fees, and he actually called me, and I went to see him. And I met him for 5 minutes on his paying fees, and I was very happy. He was driving a classic
Alfa Romeo.
Wow. And he was even supposed to give me the car, he did not give me. But let me not talk about that. It was a frustrating experience in terms of the common thing for me is the lack of resources.
Yeah.
That is a common, even Chim, you can remember in Jamhuri, it's the time I think I was sent home because of fees.
Actually, no, this like you've mentioned it, you are always big. I used to join you guys simply because I wanted to just go walk around. I will say this, my mother worked hard. I was among the very lucky few who can say I came from a single parent household. There are 2 women in the house, 2 single parents, and they provided above and beyond. So I grew up really privileged. But yeah, I used to join these guys on their adventures, Maze. I also used to get up to fatherless activities. Yeah?
And the worst part is what you realize when you've grown up is, apart from the lack of finances, is the lack of structure. That is my biggest take home in as far as being growing up without a father. I believe I would be so far ahead right now if I had a father.
If you didn't have to teach yourself structure when you were already a man.
Yes.
After having suffered the consequences of not having learned structure as a child.
Yeah. And my mom, I'm going to repeat, I can't blame my mom. It is just something that my father would have taught me.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about my mom is my mom did not alienate my dad. She said, you will learn for yourself who your father
who he is.
And
I will also give him, as I was saying earlier, give him the opportunity to evolve and perhaps get in touch with his son and be involved in the child's life.
And the best part about it is she never told me anything. My mom has never badmouthed my dad even once. This is a man who has 8 baby mamas. She has never badmouthed him even once. She told me, you will learn for yourself who your dad is. You will have your own relationship with him.
Okay.
And from that, my summary will be this. I don't want my children to go through what I went through.
Thank you. And that's usually what it is for most single fathers. From what I see, not just single fathers, the men raised in single parent households, once you come of age and you... Don't get me wrong, there are always going to be the useless niggers. You get, there'll always be those guys. Because also single mothers have a tendency to baby their sons or turn them into husband sons. And that spoils the man. Right? Because he always knows I have the comfort of my mother, and the mother getting involved in the child's life almost like she is the wife. That's what a husband son is. But ultimately, what I do know is when a man becomes a man having been raised from a single parent household, when he begins to know better, you are around other men and you realize, like, for example, you realize this guy who grew up with his father, and this is a theme I've noticed.
We've noticed that.
They're usually very grounded, they're usually very stoic. Because your father showed you you're unshakable. Your father, you always knew, worst comes to worst, I can hide within my father. I can hide within his masculine. Until it got to the point where he's slowly showing you, exposing you to the world. Right? So as he slowly exposes you to the world, you begin to realize, maze, I can actually handle this. For me, my journey was, I guess, not unlike yours. Like you, I ended up creating an entire idea behind even who my father was. I remember longing for my father because my situation was slightly different. He was not from the same, let's say, community, the same setup as us. And I remember longing to know who he was. I remember being a child and just wondering, in those minutes when in between when your head has hit the pillow and as you're drifting off to sleep and you begin to think about an interaction I saw with my friend and his father, and I'm like, why doesn't my father love me? I've had those struggles, right? Mine was a bit different though. My mother was a very pragmatic woman. My mother was the discipline, yeah. And this is also something I've noticed in single mother households. Sometimes they tend to go overboard with the discipline. Like, my mom would flex me, bro. She would flex me. My mom made me straight gangster, Maze. Straight gangster. God rest the dead. I miss her, but like, it was crazy. Also, another thing that my mom taught me very quickly was she began to realize I have outpaced her. By the time I was in my teenage years, you're literally disciplining me because I allow it. Let's tell the truth. I allow it. I allow you to pinch my cheeks. I allow you to hit my head. You're getting. That's when my mom began to quickly realize this is not sustainable. So she began to teach me also how to have dialogue. Right? That is something I gained from my mother, how to have dialogue.
Actually, that's a quick thing. I think we should say what the most impressive trait our moms taught us.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. Yeah,
something very good you've said there about the dialogue. Should I say something quick?
Yeah, sure.
One thing I like about my mom is she gave me a desire to always have a relationship with Christ. In terms of God is very important in life. And the second, just the second one is she's an empath. So she also gave me something along those lines. So,
what is it your mom imparted on you?
Independence. And I think that's the thing. I think the major thing is anti-fragility. Wow. Right?
Actually, yeah, my mom also gave me that. I like that. Yeah.
Like just learning how to be like a proper shock absorber. Like life will throw things at you, but you won't falter, right? And I think that's the one thing really taught me, especially as the only child. Right? You see, you don't have brothers, sisters who are looking after you. Right?
Yeah.
You're just there. When you leave home where you are two, you're going and you're one.
Yeah.
Right? So independence, I think, is one thing because she has always been an independent woman and she took me to the best schools.
Nice.
Like she could afford, right? I remember there's a time like she would just pay school fees to the tune of even like 40-50% of her pay slip. Right?
Wow.
And that because she really wanted that education and that independence in me. So so that's what I'm really grateful for. I think
that's dope. That's actually really, really dope.
Yeah.
I'd also say, like, as I was saying, my journey with being a child from a single mother household, I'll focus more on, because our stories are pretty similar in when we were kids. But as an adult, it got to a point where I began to realize my mom has done the most she can do. And we used to have very frank, my mother, as I said, was a pragmatist. We used to have very frank, very honest conversations. And I'd tell her, you've taught me as far as you can teach me. Now it's for me to go into the world and decide what I'm dealing with. The biggest problem with being from a single parent family in my setup was I did not have any uncles who are willing to hold my hand and help me become a man. So like you, I ended up getting bits and pieces. And when my father finally circled around, it was from a position of, like you, my father has very many children, actually all across Africa. We are very many. And it was even my effort to go and look for him. And I remember being very disappointed that when we finally made that connection, it was almost like, so, which it was a joke, but I was like, it's like, so you have a 6-year-old sister here. She might become yours to look after someday. I'm like,
actually, those men who get kids with men, whatever. Same like my youngest sibling is, I think, sibling is, I think 4 or 5 right now. yeah. So your shock is not. This guy is actually very potent with their.
Women like the same archetype of a man, as we said, the old bad boy build, yeah. And for me, it was just growing up as a man. I got to a point where I was like, listen. And I remember having this conversation with my mom. I told her, you've done what you can. You give me your advice, but you give me advice from a female perspective. And some of the situations I'm dealing with, I have to deal with them as a man. So I need advice from the male perspective. And you cannot help me. And I remember for a second, micro emotion, almost like the heart. And then the realization that, okay, what you're saying is true. I never stopped going to my mom while she was alive for advice. We used to have very long phone call conversations. But it got to a point my mom used to tell me, I can't advise you on that. You need to find a man. You need to look for a man. And I thank God for my mom being so pragmatic, because that's a trait I really picked up on.
It's funny. My mom, I don't think my mom has ever said, I don't know what to tell you. What my mom normally do actually in a situation like that, she'll always tell me, and that's why I told you about prayer. She'll tell me, I'll express what I'm saying. Then she'll tell me, I've heard what you've said. What we can do is I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. And she says she intercedes for me a lot. So she'll pray for me. And afterwards she'll ask me, how did that thing go? And that is a beautiful thing. Most of the time, it ends up well for me. Yeah. So I'm like, in those situations where she can't advise me, she prays for me. Yeah. I think you know your style of parenting. That's why for me prayer is a big thing. Clearly for her, she was very smart.
No, my mom was actually very prayerful. It's
that pragmatism.
For me, the prayer part is something I like to keep personal. It's like one of the memories I keep to myself about my mom. You understand? But yeah.
But even this conversation about our mothers and all that, it shows me, as in, how beautiful, how tough our mothers are. Because I don't think they are bad memories, like super bad memories about our mothers, because we can understand where they came from. You might not agree with what they did.
All the bad memories I have about my mom. I was a terrible, terrible little boy. Oh God. Oh God. I gave my mom hell, especially as a teenager. I gave my mom hell. I don't know about you guys. When I rebelled, I gave my mom hell.
But even when we were praising them, that's what I was going to. Can we help people avoid becoming that? Because we don't. I don't want other kids to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
That embarrassment of every time the fish sheet is read, I'm there.
Or the embarrassment of every time guys are talking about their relationship with their dad, all you can do is you smile and make up some bullshit sort of scenario to try and hide your. And I'm impressed that all of us, I'm actually happy to realize that was not a me experience. Like everyone experienced that.
Even another one I can remember is sports day.
Yeah.
Your parent cannot come because she's working. She's alone. So one of them at least can take off. In my office, one of the ladies, she's a very good mother. She takes off and she goes for sports day. Yeah. My mom was not able to do that. So there's no time my parent was there for sports day.
Actually, in the lives of my children, that is something I swore to myself. I remember I was very athletic, and coming out, for some reason I was always number 2, which always stung. But I remember looking at the crowds as I'm running, and I can, you can see your classmates' parents, and you're looking for your mother, and she's not there. Because she got an off, but she couldn't get an off as early as your race. Well, you know the way class 1, class 2 starts their stuff earlier. She'll come and she'll be there when the older kids are running. And I swore to myself, my children will never experience that. So, and I'm grateful to the mother of my children, because what we do is we are a team. We try as much as possible to be there together. And sometimes it's awkward, because I remember like when she was going through, she's in a relationship, and there was this new relationship energy, and I remember her glowing, looking at her phone and giggling, and when I'd be like, yo, there was that awkwardness. Yeah, there was that awkwardness.
Yeah.
But all in all, we are a team. We are a team, and I love seeing my kids' faces light up when they see, there's mom, there's dad. You're getting, yeah.
Actually, that thing was a big one.
Yeah.
Missing sports day. I don't think my mom has been to any of my events in school. And the truth is, at that age, is a very important. Even now, I should add, is there's something you used to do where your parent like takes you to school the first day or something. My mom could not do that often. As in, where you actually even see parents coming to get their kids. I think I used to feel very jealous, envious actually.
My mom made time to pick me up.
And growing up, I'm curious how Father's Day was, right? Because that's one thing where you have absent father. Yeah, I was talking about actually just like Father's Day, right? And for me, especially when you have an absentee father, then that day it's not a holiday, but it's more of a thing that is out there, like Happy Father's Day, Happy Mother's Day. So it's in your face, it's out in public, right? And when you're growing up, that's not really celebrated in schools or not, but when you get out there, it's like a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And I remember for me, there's a time I was part of, church, right? There's a church I used to go and part of like those they used to call Sunday school kind of thing, and there was the church organized like Father's Day kind of father and son kind of hangout, right? And I remember one of the conscious decisions that my mother made was she thought it would be a really good idea if I went to it was a retreat. I remember it was in Lukenya, right? And the idea was I would go with a family friend who's like has kids who are friends of mine, right? And we would go there, and it would be sort of like a learning experience for me, right? Just being around and seeing what father sons talk about, right? And for me it was a hard one because it was one of those like activities you do like. And you're there with your father and
Father, son, then there's you there just with your hands in your pockets waiting for a counselor to notice and be like, I'll do it with you.
It's like you're that willing, right? Like kind of thing. And you're supposed to share stories about your father. And I remember like
that's painful.
being like
That's painful.
wow. That's when my mom's friend when I was like, no, don't do that. But there was that awkwardness in the room. So I think, like you're saying, like it's only fair if like the children just generally grow up with both parents present, for because it calls for different, like a father in different occasions,
Different roles, yes.
mother different
Yes.
occasions. Otherwise, that's what your kid will experience in such situations, and they're unavoidable, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just one of those things, but I think for me the work that my mother did for, like I said, 28 years is incredible. And the thing, just to think about, I knew it was a big deal being like a single mother is like a big deal, but I didn't understand the gravity of it until I became a parent.
An adult. Yeah, actually a parent.
Yeah,
yes,
parent.
yes.
Because, like, wow.
It's
one of those
Actually,
things, like,
it's not
it's
easy.
hard.
For me, I
Right?
began to appreciate the mother of my kids when I began to have those anxieties.
Yeah.
When the children are at my digs and maybe there's an allergic reaction or they
Yeah.
get sick and I'm panicking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I can call her. Fortunately for me, I'm married now.
Yeah.
So I have a woman in the house with whom, we can deal with it. But before that, it was almost panicking. I'm like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
Then you begin to look back at, that's what your mother went through.
So-
And your mother didn't have anyone to call and be like, okay, what do I do? Or
Yeah.
So you begin to really appreciate what single parents go through.
Yeah, that's true. It's like basically flying a plane as you build it, right? I think
Yeah.
that's how
Yeah.
parenthood is, because there's no amount of preparation you can do prior.
Imagine
You can set money aside for a fund,
Yeah.
for school, but
Yeah.
like
The actual
their
parenting, yeah.
is very difficult.
And
so
for me, my parting shot will be like a challenge. I get it. Times have changed. But what I'd say is, for the love of God, if you are a single mother, dedicate yourself. I know it's tough. Dedicate yourself in such a way that when your son or your daughter has grown up and they're looking back at how you raised them, they have a reason to smile. You know, we are talking about old school, the Old Testament women, Old Testament mothers, right? And we know being a single mother is the wrong way to go the family way. Let's just say what it is. Being a single father, in my case, is the wrong way to go the family way, to put someone in the family way, right? But for the love of God, give your children a reason to be asked about you. And I've seen the way all you guys are glowing, but you're remembering something about your mom. You having memories, good memories, even with the bad memories. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, yo, I put her through hell and she toughed it out. She thugged it out, Maze. You're getting. So for the love of God, if you're a single parent, give it your all. Give it your all. If you can get a man in your life that you can trust, I do not recommend a man outside of the family. I strongly recommend your father or your brother or an uncle. Please ask them to get involved with your children.
Someone trust in the character is
Maze. Because some of these situations.
yeah.
Hey. I remember guys writing letters about stories, compositions about my best friend, and the guy says his dad, and I'd be rolling my eyes like,
my hero is my father.
My hero is my father, you know?
Who is that?
But guys, I just wanted to say thank you. You guys came through.
Can I add something?
Sure.
This will sound very harsh, but the single biggest predictor for success is what?
Having two parents in the house.
Yes. That is the biggest single predictor. So
actually, the guys you see here are outliers.
Yeah.
They are successful in their careers, but they are outliers. To come from a single parent household, with the way the world is set up, with all of the temptations in the world, all of the deviations in the world, all the predators in the world, to have men who got to a point where they realized they needed to fix themselves beyond what their mothers had done, it is not easy. And this is not an example of the vast majority. You guys are actually the outliers.
It's exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And even as I was going to say about that, to the women who are already single mothers, I believe it's already done. My advice will be make the best of your situation and if you can, they said, get a man involved a man who can actually help your kids, a relative most likely. That's number one. Number two, this is the controversial bit. If you can get together with your man again, or the man who you got a kid with, do it. People are breaking up nowadays over very small things.
Still, even if you're going to be a second wife, do it.
Let your kids have that two-parent family thing.
Yeah.
Because we know the stats for kids who grow up in single mother homes, the stats are just scary. So if you can make up with that guy, live together. Number three, to the people who are not single mothers yet or single fathers yet, please plan accordingly. Do due diligence. They say do not carry before you
as a man, because we are men, we're talking to men, do not make her carry before you marry.
Yes.
Do not.
Because we're trying to also have a solution for the long term.
It sounds boring, yes. I know, but for the love of God, do not make her carry before you marry.
Yeah, that was my parting shot.
Alright. So, are there any more parting shots?
No, I think in terms of just building a family. Like a family is just something wonderful. Something I can speak from experience. That stability, and one thing that I would just say when it comes to stability, there's this thing that I personally believe in, which is sometimes it's good to have strong opinions that are loosely held, right? I think a lot of that conflict that comes into play is you're holding on to, it's you have a dogmatic kind of beliefs in who you are and how things should be. So if you really create that environment where you can have healthy debates, right, with somebody, right, and be open-minded enough to see, like, to gauge things and see that, actually you could be right.
Yeah.
I'm right? I think that's the only way in which, you can handle conflict which is present, across all our settings. So even as you date, as I'm talking with my wife, as
Talking
doing
to
the
my wife or the mother of my kids. Yeah.
conflict, I think, is present across all circumstances. So I think having that mindset of really having strong opinions but loosely held, reduces the ego and helps you to come to a compromise, healthy debates,
You learn.
and make decisions and learn.
Yeah.
Most importantly.
Alright, guys. So now I can go. Yeah. I wrapped up. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So thank you so much for you guys coming through. These have been some really, really dope conversations. Listen, guys, I know it's a very loaded topic, so we can't cover everything within the time frame we have. And you saw we've spilled over. We really tried. But ultimately, what we can do is for you guys to jump in the comment sections and we will engage. We can continue having this conversation even further. Please do not forget to subscribe. Please don't forget to like. For you guys, it's a very, very small thing, but that like is a huge help for us getting our channel to grow. Yeah? Subscribe, share with everyone that you love, everyone that you want to have this conversation with, and catch us next time on The Crib Sheet. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
All right, cool.
It's a wrap, huh?